Hi everyone, welcome to a webisode of Oxygen. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Nada Ahmed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, Chris.
Nada, for our audience that are going to be watching this podcast, can you just give a little short, brief introduction about yourself?
So I am sitting here in Houston, Texas, and I run a startup hub called Energy Tech Nexus, where we're supporting companies that are working on the energy transition and really developing the future technologies that will drive our energy in the future.
One of the things I want to try and have a conversation about, people use the word climate change, climate impact, climate innovation. Yeah. The one thing I think that's missing is that people can't relate to that on a very personal basis. How does this industry try to humanize these big
Mm,
words?
yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, because the way that we use these terms come in limits us the way that we think about the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And for me, the way I've always thought about this is growing up as a kid when I learned the impact of using plastics on our environment, or how we're polluting our waters and our rivers, and it's impacting the sea life on our planet. So that would really touch me. Like, why aren't we not taking better care of the environment? So for me, it's not using these terms like climate change and thinking about it in the conceptual way of like these CO2 emissions rising, which they are, but it's also just thinking about why wouldn't you want to take care of the only home we have, which is the planet Earth, and making sure that it can continue to nurture us and continue to be our home for many, many more millions of years, other than shortening our lifespan on this planet because we increase the temperatures, so it becomes unlivable not only for other species but also for us. And we're thinking geological time span here, so I'm not thinking this is going to happen in my lifetime or even the lifetime of my kids, but we're thinking, are we somehow shrinking our time on this planet? And if you think about it, the planet has been around for billions and billions of years, and we've maybe been around for 50,000 years. And if you put that on a time scale of 1 year, humans have maybe been around for just 30 minutes, and some people claim it's even less than that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, two parts. One is we don't want to get people get overwhelmed. So like, oh, we want to clean up the ocean because the big industry was polluting the waters, and we've seen all these videos of turtles and sharks and fish getting injured in the water. We get it, right? There is a serious concern, but the big question is, how can individuals take responsibility of such a massive challenge that one can easily get overwhelmed to say, well, my little bit won't do anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very valid question because a lot of the times also there's like different philosophies, right? People say like on the human level, what you're going to do on the individual level, it's not going to make a difference, because it's like these big corporates, they need to change the way that they do business. But who's running these corporates? They're individuals, and it's us. So I think it's about what we're teaching our kids. It's how we're being role models and how we're as consumers just being more aware, and making better decisions on what products we're buying, what are we introducing into our environments. And here in the US, I tell people like, let's be more active, like politically, like make your voices heard, go to your local elections, not just the elections that happen every 4 years, but make sure that you're part of what's happening within your municipalities, within your schools, what kind of decisions are being made, and making sure that they're aligned with what you think is important and good. So I feel like each individual has a lot of influence and a lot of power. You can create a movement and influence other people. So just start by, being aware, do the little actions that you do, and many other people will be influenced by it too.
Great, that's a good point. Civic duty, it's not just doesn't come around every 4 years on election day. You need to be involved. And so one of the things I want to just touch up and continue on this part. So basically, be a voice, be a loud voice, have the right concerns in place to demand that from your politicians. Otherwise, it's going to be left off the agenda, the political agenda, which is in politics, they're bombarded constantly with lobbyists and voices, so they've got to take the right action. So this is interesting. This is something that we've been doing with Oxygen, a product that we've produced because, my interest is clean air innovation, and I think every breath that we take either increases our lifespan or it shortens our lifespan. And again, because air is so prevalent, people don't really care about it. They're like, well, it's in the air, right? But once you start telling them, well, do you know what kind of quality of air you're breathing? What's in that air? And people take 22,000, roughly on average, 22,000 breaths a day. Um, so when we talk about that and we've created this product, they understand that, oh, it is something that has a direct impact on my health and well-being, and therefore I can go and talk about it. What kind of products can people take and then use that as a platform, as a voice to the politicians and say, look, if these guys are doing it, if they're making something like this, why shouldn't it become the norm and the standard?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I love what you're doing with Oxygen and what you described to me as a paint that you can put on your wall, and it increases your quality of air inside your houses. The amount of time we spend inside our houses, the ventilation that we have. I mean, that is a big issue. And in many places, because of the smog and the pollution that you have outside, being able to have a system, like how are we thinking holistically about creating these systems, building our homes, that we keep that in mind. And those kind of innovations are super relevant and super important. And it's not only on the policy side of things that you encourage these kind of innovations, but how do you as individuals are also thinking about how can we still maintain our quality of life, because a lot of people are like, we don't want to decrease, use less water, we don't want to use less power because we're just used to this. But you don't have to, if you're able to set up the limitations and the constraints and say within this, how do we make it better for ourselves? Those constraints can actually be really good drivers for
Mm.
innovation. We've seen DeepSeek recently come out with a model that beats OpenAI, Meta, and all these big companies that have poured billions into creating these AI models. But DeepSeek had like constraints, like they didn't have access to the NVIDIA chips, right? Because we're not exporting. There's like a limit to how much you export them to China, and they did not have all all that those billions of dollars to be able to innovate. And within those constraints, they were still able to innovate and create something that was better and faster, but at a cheaper price and using, cheaper computer or processing power or less power. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, so innovation is now global. I'm a globalist. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a big fan of globalization. I've traveled around the world, so huge fan. And I think one of the things with climate action and people understanding the importance of its impact on our individual lives, irrespective of where we live, is the fact that we are all responsible for this one planet that we live on. And whatever we do in one part of the world will have an impact on another part of the world. Whether we like it or not, whether we believe it or not, I always say, air flows. So the fact that I'm talking right now, sitting here in Toronto, at some point, this air that I move will reach some other part of the world. Whether I like it or believe it or not, it happens. So on that note, what kind of actions, immediate actions, do you think people can take where they can feel good about themselves and they can become participants in this movement, and they can then use it as an example to get their friends and family and colleagues involved?
Hmm. Yeah, good question. I think number one, just become curious. I mean, if this is something that's bothering you, that you are thinking about, become curious. And there's so many resources available. There's so many people that you could follow who will, share their knowledge, whether that's on Instagram or whether that's on LinkedIn or whether they're writing blogs, is really understanding. And I think, this is something that I learned from somebody, that there's so many problems in the world. Like some people want to solve the problem of poverty. Some people want to solve the problem of, access to energy, where, and some want to really work on climate change. And so you don't have to work on everything. So even within climate change, think about, where do you think you could add most value? Where are you most passionate about? So whether that's on products that people use in their homes and how there are toxins within that, and that's bad for humans, bad for the environment, and working towards that and really understanding what are these toxins and how do we as individuals lobby against them and drive a movement so we're buying less of those products, so that as kind of a market, we move away from it. So find that niche, become curious, find that niche for yourself and focus on that. Sometimes it's easier that way, instead of thinking about this like big problem and say, well, I have to reduce everything I do, I have to completely change everything. You can start small, take small steps, and start somewhere where it's easier for you. And then you can start making bigger steps and start influencing others.
Love that. I love that answer. Get curious, start at home. Those are the two takeaways, what you just explained. I appreciate your time. Thank you for the message. And I look forward to having more of these kind of amazing conversations with you as we go forward. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.